welcome everyone to another episode of the Maitri podcast between friends, Conversations with Maitri. I am your host Nandini Ray, and in this episode, we will find out what South Asian youth are doing in breaking the stigma attached to mental health. Now, why are we talking about mental health? Well, we want to emphasize that mental health affects all of us. But in our community, in the South Asian community, most of us are reluctant or uncomfortable talking about our mental health. And as a result, we don't get right help on right time. But the point is, when we ignore our emotional well being, we ignore our right to have a safe and healthy life. So it is important to have an open communication about our emotional well being and to raise awareness about this neglected health topic. We have done a couple of podcast episodes and panel discussions, bringing field experts, community members. But I believe we need to continue this conversation so that we can send out an important message that taking care of our mental health is necessary and it is our right. It is great to see that youth in our community are paying attention toward this huge community problem and they are raising awareness. Manmukti is such an organization. They have different university chapters where students are advocating for culturally competent mental health services and care. Two representatives from Manmukti UC Davis chapter are joining me today to have an uncomfortable yet very important conversation. It is my pleasure to introduce Amber and Brinda. Amber Mishra is currently a fourth year student at UC Davis studying statistics and political science, and he has served as a student body senator. Brinda Prothia is also a fourth year student at UC Davis studying neuroscience and public health. Both Amber and Brinda are doing their part in breaking the stigma and spreading awareness about the importance of mental health in the South Asian community. Brinda and Amber, I'm so happy to have you here on our show.
Thank you so much.
We're excited to be here.
So tell me about the Manmukti UC Davis chapter.
For sure. I think I can take that one. And Brenda, feel free to add on if I miss any information. So we are part of UC Davis's Manmukti, and Manmukti is a mental health awareness club, and we usually advocate and represent the South Asian community on our college campus. We have a lot of chapters of this club throughout the country in different colleges. And as a chapter at UC Davis, we host many de-stressing events such as painting night, movie nights, and other student body events that might help our fellow South Asian students de-stress. It's a way for us to be also culturally connected within one another and try to find that community on campus. But all in all, we represent mental health awareness throughout our club. We post infographics on our Instagram regarding certain mental health issues and about generational trauma, but we try to tackle all of these concepts in a more comfortable and friendly way.
Wonderful. It's great that students are doing their part in raising awareness. I found some heartbreaking statistics. I was on the website of National Alliance on Mental Health, NAMI.org. I saw that 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 14 and 75% by age 24. And suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 14. It's so frustrating. 10 to 14 years old, they're children. And what is going wrong in our society that 10 to 14 years old, they're taking their lives? CDC, site, it says that suicide is the leading cause of death in the United States, with 45,979 deaths in 2020. I couldn't believe my eyes. That's the number of people who think about or attempt suicide is even higher. But it's possible that many of them could have been saved if they had right help and right time. So thank you so much for raising awareness, doing your work. But I'm curious that what motivated you to join Manmukti? Why did you want to work for this stigmatized community issue in the first place?
So I can start off. So this kind of goes back all the way to eighth grade, but I moved to the United States right before like eighth grade started, and I was nervous about the transition because that's a big cultural change. You're leaving all your friends behind. You're starting a new life in a new place,
Mhm.
and everything was going fine. I was adjusting, but then something that I didn't even know would take such a big toll on my mental health did. And it was my accent. Like, so you can tell I do have an accent, and I've lived here for like almost 8, 9 years now, and it's still a part of me. And now I've finally learned how to embrace it. But basically, this was again in eighth grade. We were in like a seminar in one of my English classes. And I was just like talking. I was just like, talking to the class and like, talking to the teacher. And I noticed like a few kids laughing and making fun. And then
Mm.
that was the first time I became conscious about something that I would have never ever thought of. So I immediately shut down. And if you ask like my friends and family, I'm like a very talkative person. And I like, talking and like having conversations with people I don't even know. So it was really like difficult for me because I basically didn't talk in school, never raised my hands, never talked to teachers. Making friends was almost impossible because I was like, oh, people are gonna see me, not for myself, but like immediately notice my accent, immediately like make a comment. And even like I did have like a few South Asian friends, but even with them, I didn't feel open because they didn't speak like me, right? They all had an American accent. And I don't know, I just got really insecure about it. And I felt like my personality kind of shut for a bit. And it was really hard to talk about this with anyone because my school was almost 80% white, right? So there was not much representation. We didn't have anything like a mental health club or anything like that on campus.
Mm.
So I was really happy that once I came to Davis, California, I was so happy to see that our school is so diverse and we have so many different clubs. And that's when I found out about Manmukti during, I think, the summer of my sophomore year. And I was so happy that I could finally be part of an organization that talks about everything and that forms a very tight knit community and just like embraces everyone for who they are and focuses on destigmatizing mental health.
Mm. Yeah, so immigrant youth can have different levels of oppression and discrimination. And yeah, thank you for sharing. What about you, Amber?
Yeah, for sure. Brenda, that was an awesome experience. Thank you for sharing it. I think for me, ever since high school, I tried to be more involved in men's mental health. And I think the first organization that gave me that breakthrough or avenue was Maitri. And I think just having my experience there in high school, when I moved on to college, I wanted to find that same outlet for myself. I wanted to find a club that generally just focused on mental health awareness. And I know UC Davis has a lot of organizations and chapters which focus on mental health. But what drew me to Manmukti a little bit more is that it's South Asian based. I think it's difficult to find those types of organizations in general within a college campus as big as UC Davis. So
Mm.
seeing a club that focuses on mental health awareness was already a plus one for me. And then I started to join it in my freshman year of college, which was back in 2019. And just meeting with the board members, I can see that my personal mental health struggles kind of aligned with what they wanted to work with. I think in specific, like when I want to work with combating toxic masculinity or just talking about reframing different types of mental health issues in our society, the fact that all of these ideals were shared by Manmukti's board in that time period, that drew me even more to like be, all right, this is the community I want for my college campus. And I think with all of these ideals and all of these stories, it kind of drew me into Manmukti as because like as a male, like it's tough to talk about mental health, but the fact that there's a safe space on campus for me helps me even more that I have a community behind me. And it's even better that it's South Asian because we know as a South Asian community, the discussion of mental health is very stigmatized in general. So all of this really brought me here to Manmukti.
Wonderful. In my personal observation, I've always noticed that youth from our community are more open to talk about their mental health well-being, about the stigma attached to it, and they're more open to seek help. But in many cases, they don't find enough support from their family and community because of the stigma. So we really, all of us need to work on to break that stigma. So while you are working with South Asian youth, you must have noticed some common issues or some issues that affect youth community members' emotional well-being. So what are those issues, in your opinion, that create pressure on their emotional well-being?
I can start off with this.
Mhm.
So I think everyone can relate to this, especially if you're living in the United States. The whole concept of like a rat race, like all of us are going to school, all of our parents have very big expectations from us.
Mm.
And there's always this constant comparison with like family members, with cousins, with friends, like sometimes your parents might say something like, oh, look at him. Like he has like a full-time job and he's doing this and that. What are you doing? Right.
Mm.
I think a lot of it just stems from like, many of our parents are immigrants and they've had a big struggle coming to the United States, with like less money and like starting a whole life for themselves. And obviously they want to see us do better than them, right? So the expectations are very high. And that also puts pressure on us because we don't want to disappoint our parents, but we also want to have like a right balance of doing something that we're truly passionate for, but also, keeping our parents happy at the same time, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Mhm. What about you, Amber?
Yeah, I think Brenda touched on a really important part, which was about our parental knowledge of mental health. I think my background and my parents' background is completely different. And I know a lot of South Asian parents kind of in general try to understand mental health, and it's a little difficult at times given the way that they were raised in their environment back in like the 70s and the 80s, because that was a whole different environment. So I think a common issue amongst the South Asian youth is how their parents are not as knowledgeable about mental health, which means it's even more difficult for the youth to bring up more of their mental health issues within their families. And I think that plays a big role because you're not able to be even close with your family. So it's tougher to even have that closure within yourself. I think ever since then, these issues are more important and it helps shape my generation's perspective towards mental health, just seeing how our parents talk about it versus how we talk about it. I think another common issue that I found is that there's really no safe space in the past for us to really just have that South Asian group to talk about mental health until now. Like I know times are changing, things are better. We have clubs like Manmukti. There's so many organizations beyond college campuses that have South Asians advocating for mental health. But I believe like as me and Brenda were growing up in like middle school or even high school, it was all really new. And we really didn't have that one safe space where we can be like, all right, this is my safe space. I can be as loose and as mentally free as I can be. But it's just difficult because you see those safe spaces for different ethnicity groups and stuff like that. But the South Asian group is still working on it. And it just takes time to really find that safe space. And I think that's one of the biggest issues within the South Asian youth because everyone wants a community at the end of the day.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank God that today's youth, they are doing their best to in raising awareness, in talking openly, talking about this issue, and what both of you shared here today. That many research articles are supporting that fact that many articles identified intergenerational cultural conflict as a major source of stress for South Asian youth. I was having a conversation with my teenage son, and he told me that South Asian youth have to balance between two cultural expectations, and when any of these expectations become too strong or too demanding, then it creates a stress. And as you say, that there are many factors that may contribute to a disconnect between immigrant parents and their children, such as language, growing up in a different cultural context and social norms, comparisons with children that like been the pointed out comparison with children within the family and within social circles, etc. And one college student even told me she told me that South Asian culture is collectivist culture, and it is good and bad. I mean, it's good that you are not alone. You can get support from your family, but too much family involvement sometimes creates lack of independence, a lack of individual space, and that can create suffocating condition. She was telling me that everyone in the family wants to know everything about you, and even when you are in a romantic relationship, it is an affair of more than just two of you who are involved in that relationship. Everyone wants to take part in decision making. And also I have noticed that family pressure and community pressure to conform to one's assigned gender often causes stress for youth in our community. Don't you think so?
100%.
Mm. That is also another stigma we need to really break. So do you see any generational difference in help seeking or supporting others?
I think I just kind of want to like talk more about what you said, how like everyone in the family is so involved, because there is a very big cultural difference, right? Like India and other Asian kind of cultures, everything is very familial, very collective. But then the United States and many Western countries, they're more individualistic, right?
Mhm.
So then when you're growing up here as a second generation, right? You start to like kind of value those ideals too, because you've just grown up here and that's how life works, right? But then your parents don't understand that, because they're coming from a place where everything's always like integrated, everyone's involved, right? So I think that's when a lot of problems start, because it's just that like children and the parents think from two different lenses, and it's really hard for everyone to like come together and like set boundaries on like this is how much you can know about my life, but then I also want some things to be private, or like it's just that things are different here and you kind of have to accept that, if that
Yeah,
makes
yeah, actually, you are so right. I mean, I am from a different generation. I am your parents' generation. So we need to also understand that we children are from different generation. They're mixing with, they are from different culture, and we need to have an open communication to understand each other's limitations and understand each other's expectation, whether it is realistic or not. Sometimes I internalize, I reflect on my own behavior. Am I doing it right? Am I understanding my children? Because I have two teenage boys, and I always think I was not like that even 5 years back. I was not even paying attention whether, but now I really try hard to understand that they are from a different generation and their expectations can be different. We have to understand each other. We have to try our best to uh, to narrow that gap. Otherwise none of us can be happy. So thank you for sharing that. We all know that there is so much stigma associated with mental health illness and emotional well-being, help seeking, blah blah. But do you think different genders face different kinds of stigma?
I think they do. And I think I can only speak about the male side because I identify as a male.
Yeah.
I believe that according to like traditional standards, like the standard skills of like being strong and not being vulnerable has always been placed at the top of the hierarchy of like what a person should be. And those skills have always been placed towards males, that males should be more strong, males should not be vulnerable. Like those traditional notions of hierarchy of these skills have always been placed with males. And since that's always tradition, it carries over generations. And all in all, those types of certain hard skills of not being vulnerable really carried over to be gender stigmas amongst male, because it's harder for males to be more vulnerable with their friends. I think, however, nowadays it's a little bit better, and there's more of a safe space, there's more of an understanding amongst males about being vulnerable. There's still a lot of work left to be done in terms of that case. And I think I wanted to research a little bit more about it. So I did do a little bit of research on the United Kingdom's mental health website, where they really talked about how the media plays such a big role with this. I believe that when the media really talks about mental health illnesses and stuff associated with males, it's always linked to violence. So when you have that link that mental illness within males is equates to violence, people are not going to have a good portrayal of it. I think like our community can like kind of read those headlines and kind of be like, all right, we see this incident happen. How can we help this person to make them feel better rather than shunning them and being like, all right, they have a mental health illness. They're probably going to be violent. We don't want that in our society. So we shun them. I think that's where the whole concept of like the traditional notions carry over within generations really affects how we really portray gender stigmas within males itself.
Yeah, cultural conditioning that men boys shouldn't cry, boys should not show any feminine kind of labeled feminine emotion, like they cannot cry, they cannot hug, they shouldn't do A B C. And that we do sometimes don't realize that is actually putting a lot of pressure on their mental health. And someone was telling me that I'm very thin, I'm not that tall, and people expect that a guy should be tall, it's a stout figure. So that is when I get those kind of feedback that I feel very sad. So yeah, so cultural conditioning, wrong expectations can put a lot of pressure. So I would like to know from Brinda.
So, like, how Amber was talking about how there are some expectations of how men should be. I would say females also have expectations, right? Like, let's say you're very strong, you don't show your emotions, then everyone's like, oh, what's wrong? Like, you not cry, like, women cry, women are very emotional. So if they start like, showing that they're strong and independent, or like, do things that like traditionally women are not expected to do, then that's also a problem in society. So I feel like at this point, like no one can really win because there's always someone to make some kind of comment, or there's always someone to be very judgmental. But at the same time, I also want to kind of tie into like the body issues, because I feel like a lot of South Asian women, most of them at some point have had some kind of body issues. And I was also doing some research about this because it really stood out to me. And I found that, like, I was reading this one article published by Princeton University, and they basically said that 6 in 19 South Asian mothers were worried about their children's body shape. And this is more than mothers of any other race. And it just like sticks out to me because when you're parents, you should embrace your child for how they are, right? Regardless of how they are. So it just, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me as to why like parents are so concerned about how their body shape of their kids are, right? When they should just appreciate them for how they are. And I think it's like when the parents act like this with their children, that's what makes the kids insecure, because most of the times it's pressure coming in from family rather than pressure coming from other parts, right? So if your family cannot embrace you for who you are, how do you expect anyone else to do that?
Yeah. And when you have, even if you have pressure from outside, if your family is supporting you, then you can handle that pressure. But if your family is not supportive, your relatives are not supportive, your community is not supportive, then that can create problem. And we have to, all of us, we need to pay attention in those, whatever you are sharing today. And thank you for sharing. South Asian women, those who we help, survivors of domestic violence, they also sometimes share a lot of community expectation, family expectation on women to keep family intact, to think about other first. So these kind of expectations, can create problem for women. So both male and female community members, they face different kind of stigma, different kind of pressure, and all of us need to think that what we can do to prevent those stigma. And the mental health illness can be preventative, and early help is critical. We all must admit that, and one shouldn't wait until they are in crisis. So for listeners who are listening to our show today, please visit National Alliance on Mental Health, NAMI.org, NAMI.org, manmukti.org, thehumecenter.org, satterhealth.org. There is a lot of resources. You will find a lot of resources, information that will help you to understand this issue, and a lot of researches and articles on scientific developments as well. You will find on those website, and start talking to your friends and family to normalize this issue, so that one day we can help each other. Amber and Brinda, if I'm asking you to give some tips to our listeners that about what they can do in breaking the stigma attached to mental health, well-being, or help seeking, what will be your tips?
So the first one would be like, how with physical illnesses, we're so quick to take action, right? I would say give your mental health as much importance as you would do with physical health, right? So let's say you fall sick or like you get like a scratch on your leg. You take quick action because you can physically and visibly, like there's a visible thing that's wrong with you, right? And with mental illness and mental health, it's often like internal, so no one can see it. And since no one can see it, they don't find the need to do anything about it. But I just want to stress that mental health is as important, if not more important than physical health. And the best thing I would do is just like, become more open about it by yourself, because once you start accepting it, it will resonate with other people and maybe they will, be more open to talking about it as well.
Yeah, that's valuable input.
Yeah, I think as for my side, I think education is the best tool that's out there to break the stigma. I think in order to show people who do not believe in mental health, the best way to teach them about it is just providing resources and educating our generation on how mental health really affects everyone, regardless of your background, regardless of your social economic status or anything. It's just that it can affect everyone. And I believe like education is your best tool in terms of teaching that. I think another example would be hosting seminars like in our public settings and stuff like that. That might be very helpful for the main public to know what mental health really is. I also think like organizing with local community leaders, local organization leaders, and just hosting more informational events and seminars about mental health is the best way to really like combat the stigma and really just educate everyone on how this topic can affect everyone. And it still does affect everyone, regardless of their background.
I think Amber makes a really good point. And just to add on, we have to realize that even our parents and older generations have faced mental health issues. It's just that they never had a term to coin it, right? So because they don't know really what these feelings are, the best thing that they could do was like kind of suppress these feelings. But now with awareness and getting educated, our generation is becoming more open to it. And the good thing is that if we are more open to it in the future, our kids, like we will be able to place like pass on those values to our children, and like hopefully in the future mental health will just be treated as something normal, something that easily anyone can talk about.
Yeah, we hope. Thank you so much, Amber and Brinda, for coming to our show and sharing your valuable input. Really appreciate your, thought process, your help in raising awareness. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Just feel free to contact us at UC Davis Manmukti if you have anything. Brenda, feel free if you want to add anything.
Yeah, it's just such an honor to be able to come over here and like spread awareness on such a big platform. And I just hope that we can make mental health such a normalized thing, so that in the future everyone can just openly talk about it.
Thank you. Listeners, as a community member, each of us has a responsibility in creating a culture of compassion and acceptance. We need to do our best in removing stigma associated with help seeking. Let's have a healthy, open dialogue, as Brinda and Amba suggested, health, so that we can normalize the talk about our mental health well-being, the way we talk about our physical health. Brinda already talked about it. So we should pay attention to our own words and action to see if that is impacting someone's emotional well-being, if we are hurting someone. And at the same time, we also need to see if we are kind to ourselves. Sometimes we forget ourselves and we are harsh on ourselves. So there is no doubt that this pandemic has impacted our emotional well-being. So we should add self-care in our routine. It is not selfish to take care of our own mental health and physical health. It is absolutely okay to talk to a professional. Be kind to your mind. This is your host, Nandini Ray, signing off today. Please keep listening to our podcast, Between Friends, Conversations with Maitri. Please share this episode to take part in raising awareness. Find all our episodes on SoundCloud and on other podcast apps. Please like and share so that more people can find our podcast. Thank you. This project was made possible by funding provided by Santa Clara County Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention.
This show is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as legal advice. Always consult an attorney for legal advice. Views expressed by guests of the radio show are individual opinions and not endorsed by Maitri.